So, welcome to today's joint program with the International Association of Yiddish Clubs and the YIVO Institute for Jewish Research. My name is Julia Rothkopf, and I'm both the co-president of the IUIC, as well as the program associate at YIVO. And today we have translator Mikhl Yashinsky joining us for Community Read, selections from the original Yiddish text of the Adventures of Max Spitzkopf, the Yiddish Sherlock Holmes by Jonas Kreppel, which was recently published by White Goat Press. And Klaus Kreppel, relative and biographer of the author Jonas Kreppel, will also be here to give a brief presentation at the beginning of the program. I would like to thank our co-sponsors for today's program, the Yiddish Book Center, the Worker Circle, Jugendtruf, and the Houston Yiddish Winkel. We are very grateful for your co-sponsorship and promotional help with this program. And just to give a brief introduction on the various organizations. So the mission of the International Association of Yiddish Clubs is to provide a global perspective and network for Yiddish groups, whether they are large or small. It seeks to exchange educational and cultural materials produced by clubs and associated organizations. It strives to foster a sense of unity while keeping the Yiddish language, literature, and culture alive and well into the new millennium. It also supports Yiddish Club conferences and works to give Yiddish a strong international voice. And for those of you who do not know YIVO, it is a very special place for the celebration, contemplation, exploration of Yiddish in Eastern European Jewish culture. We are located in New York City, where our library and archive contain over 24 million documents and 400,000 books. And these resources are used by researchers from all around the world. And so now I would like to hand it over to Klaus Kreppel, biographer of the author Jonas Kreppel, who will give a very brief presentation. Klaus, you need to unmute yourself.
It must turn on the microphone, please. It's usually the lower left corner.
So it's better? Oh, yeah. Okay, my dear listeners, and especially Ruth, Julia, and Mikhl, and all the listeners from all the world, and perhaps some members of the Kreppel family or the descendants of the Kreppel family. I will begin my introduction to the life and work of Jonas Kreppel with an event from the year 2018. It was the year of the commemoration of the German occupation of Austria and the Nazi takeover in Vienna 80 years ago. In March 2018, the Austrian Ministry of Foreign Affairs hosted the official launching of the first biography of Jonas Kreppel. The title is Jonas Kreppel, Glaubenstreu und Vaterländisch. Here it means in English, true to his faith and fatherland. The three authors, Evelyn Adunka, Thomas Soxberger, and Klaus Kreppel, that's me, were invited to present the book before a select political and cultural audience. The Israeli ambassador and the German ambassador to Austria were also present. The chief press officer of the Austrian Ministry of Foreign Affairs regarded Jonas Kreppel as his forgotten Jewish colleague being now delivered from oblivion. Indeed, when I began my researches on the life of Jonas Kreppel in 1970, he was completely unknown. At Yad Vashem, one searched in vain for his name among the names of the victims of the Shoah. In an era before the internet, I finally succeeded in establishing contact with Jonas Kreppel's surviving relatives. In Israel, first of all, Jonas' son Leo Kreppel and his family. Lee is his great-grandson. He is present today. Gradually, contact was expanded to the surviving descendants of Jonas' siblings, Alexander and Chave Silke, and the Frankel family. We compared our distinct family narratives and discovered that they converge at a common place of origin, Kreppelhof. and in Silesia, Schlesien. In all probability, we have common ancestors. Through Leo's stories and letters, I gained the first overview of Jonas' life. Later, I supplemented my knowledge through intensive study of primary sources. Jonas was born in 1874 in Drohobych in Austrian Galicia. His mother tongue was, of course, Mameloschen, Yiddish. At that time, Drohobych was an economic and cultural center in eastern Galicia, where Polish, Ukrainian, Yiddish, and German were the languages of daily life. Since the Kreppel family ran a renowned clothes business on the Rynek in Drohobych, with all kinds of Jewish and Goyish clients, Joyner grew up accustomed to multilingualism. His teachers in the Cheder nominated the highly gifted Joyner for training as a rabbi, but Joyner took a different path of life. Since Joyner was not permitted to attend a secondary school, he acquired a comprehensive education and knowledge as a printer's apprentice. His mentor was the printer and publisher Aaron Hirsch Zhubnik. As a proponent of the Haskalah, the Jewish Enlightenment, Zhubnik distributed scholarly and pedagogical literature and, moreover, a German language newspaper printed in Hebrew characters. Thanks to his quick grasp, Joyner became an editor of this newspaper and from a very early age maintained contact with the cultural scene of Drohobych. In the year 1896, Jonas Kreppel left the Galician province for the cultural center of Krakow. He was 20 years old. Josef Fischer, a famous publisher and printer from Krakow, took notice of Jonas and offered him the opportunity to marry into his family business. The wedding with Josef's daughter Helene Fischer was celebrated in 1898. Two sons were born, Salo in 1899 and Leo in 1906. Fischer's publishing program was characterized by enormous diversity. It ranged from scholarly literature, particularly rabbinic and historical, to Yiddish fiction and plays, and extended to Zionist writing in Hebrew, German, Polish, and Yiddish. Above all, however, Joyner was emerging as a central figure in Yiddish literature in Western Galicia. Quite incidentally and entirely outside the scope of the publishing house's highbrow catalog, Joyner Kreppel wrote the detective stories presented here, beginning in 1908. As these works were regarded as dime novels and shouldn't, they were published anonymously. Josef Fischer was responsible solely for the printing of these penny dreadfuls. The editor in charge was Joseph's son, Moritz Fischer. The anonymity of the authorship was lifted only in 1929 in Salman Reisen's Lexikon von der Jiddische Literatur. The leitmotif of the Spitzkopf stories is similar to the central theme permeating Kreppel's entire literary oeuvre. Jewish people, wherever in the east or west of the Habsburg Empire, are threatened, persecuted, accused, forced to be baptized, and even murdered out of anti-Semitic motives. In the end, the perpetrators will be caught and justice will be served. The happy end expresses Joyner Kreppel's deep confidence in the divine judgment that will restore righteousness. Kreppel focused his primary work on daily and weekly newspapers in Yiddish, German, and Hebrew. His cultural motivation was to reconcile an Orthodox Jewish readership with Western civilization. His political motivation was to secure for the Jews of Galicia an appropriate place within the multi-ethnic state of Austria-Hungary. The government in Vienna took notice of Joyner and offered him a position in the press office in the year 1914, 10 years in the foreign ministry, and from 1924 in the federal chancellery. Joine published patriotic tracts and articles and, until 1920, edited the Jüdische Korrespondenz. Yeah, Jüdische Korrespondenz. It's a Kaiser here. The Journal of the Agudas Yisrael with World Organization of Orthodox Jews. In 1925, the highlight of his publishing activities followed with the publication of the handbook Juden und Judentum von heute, also Jews and Judaism of today. Kreppel also published Hasidic legends and collection of Jewish jokes. He was a tireless writer of books and articles. A list of his works is compiled in the Lexikon von der Jiddische Literatur. Kreppel walked a dangerous tightrope. Without an academic degree, he forged an astonishing professional and political career, yet he also cultivated many opponents within the Jewish community and enemies in secular society. They considered him as an opportunist because he served the state of Austria through all changes of polity, from monarchy to democracy and ultimately to autocracy. Kreppel maintained friendly relations with Federal Chancellor Ignaz Seipel, a Catholic priest and anti-Semite. The Chancellor supported Kreppel's appointment as consul in Jerusalem, but leading Zionists prevented this. Kreppel administered first aid to Austro-Fascist Chancellor Dollfuss, as the latter lay dying following an assassination attempt in 1934. Kreppel fought until the very end of Austria's independence from Nazi Germany. Together with the entire political and cultural elite of Austria, Joine was arrested by the Nazis and transferred to the concentration camps of Dachau and Buchenwald. It was in May 1938. 2 years later, he was killed. After the war, he fell into oblivion. Gradually, Joine Kreppel was brought back from obscurity. By publishing the Spitzkopf stories in English, you have played an essential part in this. Thank you very much, Mikhl Yashinsky, for instance. Okay, thank you very much.
I'm muted. Thank you so much, Klaus, for that wonderful presentation. I'm also going to put a link in the chat to read more about Jonas Kreppel. Where did my link go? In the lexicon. So that way you can read more and learn more. All right, great. Thank you so much. All right, so now I will introduce our guest, Mikhl Yashinsky, who will lead the remainder of today's program. Mikhl Yashinsky is a Yiddish performer, playwright, translator, and educator. He has performed in the National Yiddish Theater Volksbühne in acclaimed productions, including Fiddler on the Roof and The Sorceress. His original works include the play The Gospel According to Chaim and the musical Feast of the Seven Sinners, both praised for bringing fresh energy to contemporary Yiddish theater. He has taught Yiddish at Columbia, the University of Michigan, Tel Aviv University, YIVO, and the Worker Circle. He co-authored the textbook In Einem and recently translated The Mother of Yiddish Theater, Memoirs of Esther Rochel Kaminska. This was published in a partnership between Bloomsbury Academic and YIVO. And he also recently translated The Adventures of Max Spitzkopf, the Yiddish Sherlock Holmes, which was published by White Goat Press. So thank you everyone for joining, and welcome, Mikhl.
Thank you very much, Julia, and thank you to everyone who's with us today. Excited about Yiddish pulp fiction and this wonderful writer, Jonas Kreppel, or Jonas Kreppel. Thank you to the International Association of Yiddish Clubs and the YIVO and everyone who has put together this event. It's really nice to be with you all and engaging in this text together. And thank you to Klaus Kreppel for that wonderful introduction. to this writer and his history and some of his intentions in writing this kind of work. Very exciting that we have other family members of Jonas Kreppel here in the audience, as well as I see Thomas Soxberger, who is one of the co-biographers, and various students of mine and teachers of mine and friends and new friends. So thank you all. I wanted to start with the words of another famous writer about this famous writer, that is Isaac Bashevis Singer, who read the Spitzkopf stories in his youth. Of course, Isaac Bashevis Singer eventually became a Nobel laureate for his Yiddish writing, his high literary fiction. But as a child, he was reading these thrillers, these pulpy stories of Max Spitzkopf, and they in fact inspired him to be a writer. So I want to start with his words about Kreppel before we dive into the Kreppel itself. Here we are. So this is what he writes in his memoirs, Isaac Bashevis Singer, in Mein Tatens Beis-Din, my father's religious court. Ich habe ungeheuben lehnen die dosige Zeitung, wo mein Bruder hat veröffentlicht Geschichtes und Übersetzungen. I began to read these newspapers in which my older brother, that is I.J. Singer, also a noted novelist, had begun publishing his stories. Ich habe gelehnt alles mit amol. I read everything at once. And here he names various writers, some pulpier, some more literary. Lehmanin, Dostoevsky, Bergelson, und die Detektivgeschichtes von Sherlock Holmes und Max Spitzkopf. In meine Augen sind die dosige Detektivgeschichtes gewinn heuche Kunst. So, of course, these were seen as schund, as low art, as sort of trashy fiction by a lot of Yiddish literati. But in his eyes, they were heuche Kunst, high art. Sie haben mich einfach verkischift. They simply enchanted me. Bis heint is mir geblieben in Sikoren a Satz von a Heft, an Unterschrift unter a Zeichnung. Until today, there remains in my mind a sentence from one of the pamphlets, a caption under a drawing. And indeed, these Spitzkopf stories were originally published. Someone's unmuted and creating noise, but the Spitzkopf stories were published originally in these 32-page pamphlets, sold for very little money. And each one had a cover illustration and a caption under it, just as Bashevis remembers. Stellt vor, wie Max Spitzkopf und sein Gehilf Fuchs überraschen a Bandit mit Revolveren und dabei ruft euch Max Spitzkopf die Wärter. So in that illustration, it shows Spitzkopf with his assistant Hermann Fuchs, who appears always at Spitzkopf's side and often gets both of them into more trouble than they ought to be. And they're surprising a bandit with revolvers in their hands. And Max Spitzkopf is crying out, Halt, Schurke, du bist verraten. Halt, you scoundrel, you've been betrayed, the game is up. Die dosige naive Wörter haben geklungen in meine Ohren wie himmlische Musik. These naive words resounded in my ears like heavenly music. Ich hab in sie reingelegt mein ganze kinderische Fantasie. I invested them with all of my youthful fantasy. So that's his experience reading these stories as a child, and we can see what a powerful experience this had on him. And I'm so grateful that with the help of the Yiddish Book Center that published this book through their White Coat Press, now new generations of people can be inspired by these stories and their heavenly music and their art and their tales of heroism and bravery and resistance against injustice. Here's a couple pictures of Jonas Kreppel as a younger man and as an older man. On Also wanted to show you what the books look like in their original. This is, of course, our volume, all 15 stories translated into English for the first time. This is how they originally looked. Here's the cover of one, and you can see it's a similar sort of scene to what Bashevis remembers. Spitzkopf with his revolver out, pointing at a bunch of bandits. Each one, as you can see, cost 20 Heller, Austrian currency. And then on the back of each volume, in the back of each pamphlet, was the same blurb about Max Spitzkopf, the great detective, der Wiener Sherlock Holmes, the Viennese detective, it should be noted, which we've made the Yiddish Sherlock Holmes, a little bit different. But this back cover promises who this man is and what he represents. I thought I'd read a little bit of that that appears on the back of every original pamphlet. First of all, it underlines the fact, which I don't think is really a fact, that Spitzkopf was a real person and he really lived, and all of these things really happened. Das ist kein ausgetrachteter Nomen. This is not a made-up name. Und das, was man erzählt von ihm, ist nicht ausgetrachtet meistens. And that which is told about him are not made-up stories. Max Spitzkopf hat gelebt. And actually this bit is, as you might be able to see in bold and bigger characters, Max Spitzkopf hat gelebt und existiert. Und die Geschichten von ihm sind emes und treu. Max Spitzkopf really lived and existed, and the stories told about him are true and faithful to the actual account. Later, it goes on and underlines his Jewishness, which is a very important aspect of these stories. He's always taking on cases that involve Jewish victims and anti-Jewish persecution. And that's really what distinguishes him most of all from Sherlock Holmes. Max Spitzkopf is a Jud, oder a Yid. Und hat sich bei jeder Gelegenheit angenommen für Jiden, and he took every opportunity to stand up for Jews. Wo ist es a Jid, etwas an Unrecht geschehen, und hat sich zu Spitzkopf gewendet, ist keinmal nicht enttäuscht geworden. Wherever a Jew was in trouble and he turned to Spitzkopf for help, he was never disappointed. Und das macht Spitzkopf für dem jüdischen Lesepublikum besonders interessant. And that makes Spitzkopf particularly interesting for the Jewish reading public, as I hope he will be today, and for the non-Jewish reading public. Good. I think now we'll move on to the story. So the idea is really of this event is that it's a communal reading of part of one of the stories. You've all received the text in advance that's been laid out in a lovely way by Raphael Finkel with the original Yiddish and my translation and the Yiddish in transliteration. And we'll go along with that and read it. I'll read it and expand upon bits here and there. And here and there, people can ask questions also if they have questions, something pressing that they want to talk about or know about. Good. So, any questions before we begin? Okay, I'll just carry on. Does the translation include the original Yiddish text? It does not include the original Yiddish text. The translation is just the translation. It's 15 stories in my English translation. For those who are curious about finding the original Yiddish of these stories, I unfortunately had to look far and wide for copies here and there. The Yiddish Book Center had 5 of the stories in the original form. National Library of Israel has another of the stories that they've scanned and put online. The Yale University Library has other stories. Eventually, I got my hands on all 15, but unfortunately, they're not all digitized. And I hope they will be. And I think the Yiddish Book Center might be working on that. In the meantime, I'll put this link in the chat. And I think I've put this one in my own Google Drive. I think if you click on that, you should have access to this story in the original Yiddish that we'll be reading. So if you want to read the whole story in the original Yiddish, that's there for you. Yes, what we saw was made expressly for this event by Rafoil and by the International Association for Yiddish Clubs, Barbara Goldstein, everyone who helped with that. Good. This is the original cover of this story that we're looking at. As you can see, Max Spitzkopf, der König von die Detectives, der Wiener Sherlock Holmes. The king of detectives, the Viennese Sherlock Holmes. And that's his side profile that appears always in this oval. I feel like almost it's maybe him in a magnifying glass, maybe. And unfortunately, the handle and barrel of a revolver coming out of the portrait, which those are tools of his trade. He's often seen with a revolver and an electric lamp, and often handcuffs as well. Always traveling with those things and ropes to bind the perpetrators once he finds them. This is der Mädchenhändler. First off, in the title, it shows you this is not necessarily the Yiddish that everyone is used to these days. So it is a sort of Deutschmährisch or German-influenced Yiddish very often. Mädchen, everyone today says Mädel, a girl, but Mädchen in German, and in this particular Yiddish, also Mädchen. Der Mädchenhändler, the person who handles in, trades in, deals in girls. That is a human trafficker. That's the crime at the heart of this story. Here we have on the original cover, really one of, I think, probably the most shocking image of any of the Spitzkopf covers. We have Spitzkopf apprehending the criminal, who's in this case a woman. She's called in the story the Mumme, the aunt, but that is slang for the proprietress of a brothel, a madam. And she's holding to the bed a half-naked girl who's been taken captive and is being trained up to serve in a brothel in Constantinople. This is a girl, Rifkele, who's been kidnapped basically from a shtetl with the promise that this man who had come into the shtetl was a very rich and wonderful man who was scouting out the area for possible oil deposits and was a great tycoon and would take her away and promise her a life of fortune and happiness. And of course, none of that is true. And he sells her into this trade of girls being trafficked for sex. And she ends up at a brothel in Constantinople in the Ottoman Empire. She's being trapped there in what they call a cheder, that is a room, but also slang for a prison, being held captive, being sort of beaten down and disciplined and broken so that she can eventually do the work that is they require of her. Except if there's a great Max Spitzkopf who's there to step in and stop all of this from happening. So thank God for that. But yeah, I think this would have been quite shocking to see just openly on a newsstand a pamphlet with a cover like this. And it shows you perhaps the sort of shock value of the cover. Well, it was there to attract people to buy it. This is an exciting and strange and unusual story that we don't always read in Yiddish literature. Also is a clue to how people may have felt about these stories, those who were detractors of these stories and considered these really trashy and not fit for the reading public to see things like this. But this was definitely a an attention-grabbing image to put on the cover of one of these stories. This is the 8th story, as you can see, of 15, the achte Heft. Good. Any other questions or comments on that before we go into the text? Feel free to just ask if you wish.
Yeah. I have a comment. The face on the top of it, that's the face of Max Spitzkopf, looks like a very dark-skinned person.
I think that's just the printing. I mean, we can see there's sort of limited colors available. There's red and yellow, maybe blue, and somehow the combination of colors, he doesn't actually always look like that exactly. I'd say the pigment isn't always the same there. But these were cheaply printed on cheap paper with limited means, and that's how he appears. But I wouldn't say that's any clue to any sort of
Can I ask about
identity.
the price? It says Heller. What is that?
That's an Austrian currency. Maybe Klaus or Thomas can expand upon Heller if you wish, but I think this was very cheap, 20 Heller. Okay. But that's a currency at that time in the Austrian Empire. These were published in Krakow, which was at that time part of the Austrian Empire. It was in Galicia. Kreppel was a Galician writer who grew up in, these eastern reaches of the Austrian Empire that are called Galicia, Yiddish speaking, but part of that German speaking empire.
Yeah, if I can say that, but there was at this time the currency was the crown, the Austrian crown, krone, and it was already a metric system, so it had, as I understand, 100 Heller to a crown.
Yeah, so sort of like 20 pennies almost.
Yeah, so it's really pennies.
Thank you.
Although I think it feels not that cheap for me, because I really think prices were actually... But
yeah, I guess one would have to look at inflation and all of that.
Yeah, but at this time, basically cheap.
Yeah, certainly cheaper than a book. I mean, these were just 32 pages.
Do you know what year this one came out? I'm sorry.
1908, I believe. All of them came out around that time. Yeah. So, Der Mädchenhändler, or in my translation, the flesh peddler. All right, so people are seeing this text. Okay. Oh, there's a few questions I see in the chat. Okay. Okay. The significance of the diacritical dots. Yeah, that's something you see in some of these more old-fashioned orthographies. They assist with pronunciation, and they make it more clear for some folks reading who are used to sort of Hebrew classical orthography with all the nikudis, all the dots and markings to indicate vowels. Yes, someone asks about the historical extent of this problem of human trafficking in the Jewish world. It was certainly a real and present danger in the time in which this story was written, and of course today. So unfortunately remains a very relevant story. But it was an actual, as someone mentions, Shalom Aleichem, a Mensch von Buenos Aires. That's the story of a man who ends up actually being a pimp working in Buenos Aires. There was a ring of human trafficking extending from the Städtlach to places like Buenos Aires, which was really the center of this trade. Jewish girls were lured into this on false premises, just like in the story, or trapped, kidnapped, and sold. The Tzvi Migdal was a very famous organization that trafficked Jewish girls to Buenos Aires. Constantinople was also a center of the trade. the human trafficking was very rampant there. It was also a sort of center point, kind of a between point for girls trafficked from the Städtler and eventually ending up in Buenos Aires. Sometimes would end up in between in Constantinople, or would be forced to work in brothels there. Many Jewish girls. Muslim girls were officially by law in the Ottoman Empire not allowed to work as prostitutes. So there were many Jewish and Christian women who were working in that trade, forced to work in that trade. Sometimes I read that they even masqueraded as Muslim girls because with a veil and everything, because that was seen as sort of very dangerous, very taboo, and therefore very alluring. But there were many Jewish girls kidnapped into this trade, and unfortunately. But interesting that Kreppel decides to tackle this and take this on and show us an example of a person standing up to it and against it, and the change that that can make, and sort of setting an example in a way for people resisting this. It's also interesting, he has in the story, I don't know if anyone's read the whole story, but there's a moment where the father of the kidnapped girl turns to a representative of, I think, B'nai B'rith, a Jewish organization, in a way trying to combat this trade. And most of a chapter is dedicated to this Jewish nonprofit executive's speech about what's happening to these girls. And he basically blames the parents. He says, you raise up your girls, you educate them, you give them a taste of the world and a desire to take part in worldly things, and you make them dream of higher and better stations in life. And in the meantime, you educate your boys very traditionally. You train them up to be rabbis and Talmud students and to sit in a yeshiva. So what do you expect will happen? These girls will dream of other men, other kinds of ways of life, and they'll fall into the trap of these men who come into the shtetl and offer other kinds of existence to them. So he blames the parents, and it's a very shocking thing. This man goes to him for help. His girl has just been kidnapped. And here he delivers this sort of sermon, this sort of castigating sermon. So I think the example that he gives of Spitzkopf is sort of alternate to that and sort of a contrast to that. He's not just sitting there railing against what these parents do. He's just jumping into action and helping. And that's what Spitzkopf does. He doesn't spend too much time thinking, putting things together, deducing, gathering all the possible clues he can, like Holmes does. He really is a sort of action hero and jumps into action with his revolver. Here, his approach is very interesting. So let's get to the story. Here, his approach is to ingratiate himself among the women who are working in this trade. So let's see. Der Mädchenhändler. So this is the middle of one of the chapters. This chapter is called Constantinople. Finally, Spitzkopf has made his way to Constantinople. He's gotten some clues that this is where the girl has ended up. There's been a telegram with addressed to a certain Berwald that he's uncovered and signed by a certain Clara. And she writes in it, awaiting fresh goods, Clara. And it's sent from Constantinople. So he goes to Constantinople looking for a Berwald, looking for a Clara. In Konstantinopel hat sich zuerst erkundigt wegen aller Schandhäuser, ob es existiert nicht ein Eigentümer mit dem Namen Berwald oder eine Eigentümerin mit dem Namen Clara. So he goes there and looks into the Schandhäuser. Just a note about a brothel in Yiddish. There's various words that you can use, as with anything in Yiddish. Schandhuis is the one used here. That is almost a house of scandal. A bordel, a heisel, that is a little house, or a freilich heisel, a happy little house, which is not so happy for these women who are working there in this story. A nafgebayis, that is in Lashon Kodesh, a house of prostitutes. Here, Schandhäuser, scandal houses, yeah, bordellos. Looking for a Clara or a Berwald. Aber in diese Nachfragen haben ihm zu kein Ziel, aber euch diese Nachfragen haben ihm zu kein Ziel nicht geführt. Auf alle seine Erkundigungen hat kein Schuwe nicht bekommen. A note here about the standardizing of the text. What we have in the Spitzkopf stories is a very Deutschmanisch orthography, a very Germanized orthography, with extra H's, extra Aleph, Eins, and also grammatically, sometimes a more German grammar. So the team here has standardized, Raphael Finkel, Shoshka Reisel, etc., made it into more of our standard Yiddish orthography. And also, when things don't match with our standard Yiddish grammar, sometimes you see in parentheses added a nit here, which the nit doesn't appear in the Yiddish. In the Yiddish, aber euch diese Nachfragen haben ihm zu kein Ziel geführt. So we don't need the extra nit, the double negative that we need in Yiddish in German. But here we have it in case you need to see that nit. Yeah. So his inquiries led him nowhere. So he's a great master of disguise. So of course he has to disguise himself and actually get in amongst the women. It doesn't help just to ask questions. He needs to play the part. This he does in all of the stories. Es bleibt mir nicht übrig, beschließt wie Mikhl zu sein auf mein Covid und zu besuchen alle diese Heislach. Efter will ich ergens wo die Gesuchte gefunden. I like that expression. Mikhl sein auf mein Covid. To, for a moment, make apologies, to excuse my honor, and to present myself as a customer at these Schandhäuser. Mikhl sein auf mein Covid. Ja, gut. Aber das ist leichter gerät wie getan. This is him speaking still. That's easier said than done. In der Türkei, hauptsächlich aber in Konstantinopel, befinden sich tausende solche Häusler. Und es kann dauern Wochen, bis ich will alle durchsuchen. There are so many brothels there, it would take forever to visit every one of them. But a detective does what he must do. Aber es ist nicht voran kein ander Brehre. Ich muss tun, was es los sich. I think there's a bit of comedy here. In the midst of this very dark and painful story, a bit of comedy of him taking it upon himself to visit the bordellos and saying, I have no other choice than to do this. Well, see, he doesn't actually have that great a time as you might think he might. He's not actually that into women. Spitzkopf is never seen having any sort of dalliance with a woman, except really in this story, and that's only for his work. And he doesn't enjoy it. Fahr fort in sein Hotel, tut sich an wie etwas a junger reicher Stutzer und lässt sich heraus auf der Jagd heraus. dresses himself up as a dandy, a playboy, a stutzer, and goes out on the prowl, auf der Jagd, on the hunt. Sein erster Weg ist auf die Hauptgassen von der Stadt. Dort, wo es herrscht der größte Verkehr in Spazierengängen. Good. The greatest amount of foot traffic with ... So we see that ... in Yiddish is often a reference to there being something that's sort of being left unsaid, sort of hidden irony, or a double entendre. So Parker und Spazierengang, you might think of it just, oh, there's a lot happening on those streets. There's a lot of people walking about, but really it means this kind of street walking. Dort, auf diese Gassen, drehen sich herum hunderte Halbweltmädlich. Und sie, rechnet will nämlich schon führen in richtigen Weg. I think this is one of those instances where there's a word in English, well, which of course comes to us from French, but that exactly matches what he has here. He has Halbweltmädlich, half-world girls. But that is a reference to the demi-monde, the half-world, which was coined by Dumas, I think, in his play about the demi-monde, of the half-world, the other side, where women are engaged in this kind of work, courtesans and so forth. So a demi-mondaine is a woman who occupies that world. He says Halbweltmädlich, that is an exact translation of demi-mondaine. Thankfully, we have in English that word. You might have to look it up in a dictionary, but it exactly matches what he has. Hat Tage nicht gerechnet. Kaum gefindt sich inmitten Strom von die Spaziergeher. Wird angezeppet von alle Seiten durch verputzte, gepuderte und parfümierte Mädlich. He's surrounded on all sides by painted up, powdered up, perfumed women. Painted up, powdered up, that's a lyric from a Tammy Wynette song. Your good girl's gonna go bad. But anyway, that's not the only time we'll see that series, verputzte, gepuderte, parfümierte. And I think it's underlining some of the discomfort of seeing women like that for a man like Spitzkopf. We can see later he's very uncomfortable. But that series of adjectives, they're so done up. I think doesn't have the nicest effect on him. Welche winken zu ihm mit die Augen. Und nicht eine, der scheppet ihm ganz direkt mit die Wörter. So now one of the women addresses him directly. Schöner Herr, willst du dich amüsieren? Willst du dich amüsieren? So that's the come on line here. Just looking at the chat, there's some interesting things going on, perhaps. Good. I could hear the accents in my head of these women. Okay, so that's an interesting thing. These women are going about trying to attract men on the streets of Constantinople, posing as all kinds of ethnicities. But these would be Jewish women, more or less, that he's encountering. Jewish women who have been kidnapped from the Städtlich. As we'll see. A Zeit lang dreht sich also herum. Dennoch entschließt sich, mitzugehen mit einer von die Straßenchontes. So he's going around, then finally he decides to go off with one of the Straßenchontes. Chonte, another word for Nafke, Zoine, Hur, Prostitutke, Halbweltmädel, all sorts of words for this occupation, including Chonte. Wohin soll ich mit dir mitgehen, mein lieb Kind? Fragt sie mit der Schmeichel. Hoch es eckelt ihm ihr Parfum und ihr Bapuder on him. So he has to make an effort to play the part, to ask her, where do you want to lead me, mein lieb Kind? Although he's actually feeling this great revulsion inside of himself. Hoch es eckelt ihm ihr Parfum. It disgusts him. Komm nur, komm, entfert sie. Und da nicht weit von dannen. Wir wollen sich fein amüsieren. We'll amuse ourselves most finely. Du wirst spenden Wein. You'll provide wine for us. Und danach, los sie heraus mit der Gelächter. Ha, ha, ha. Once I was in a Yiddish play, and in the text of the play, I think it was the Kishifmacher and the Sorceress, it has ha, 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 for when a person laughs. And one of the actors was actually doing that. Ha, 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 ha. And I think it was our director, Mikhl Didner, who said, you don't actually need to say ha, ha, ha. That is just the way that laughter is expressed. But you can laugh however you see fit to laugh. So she's laughing, trying to be flirtatious. Geht ihr noch und sehen dich, als sie hat gehabt a Vogel, stuckt sie ihr Hand unter seiner herein und führt ihm geormt in epis an Nebengas herein. This is an interesting word we have here, Vogel. So we have here, Raphael has put mark. Vogel is everywhere in these stories. Sometimes, first of all, Vogel is literally a bird, as we know. Sometimes the victim is a Vogel, and the villains are talking about the victim as a Vogel. Sometimes Spitzkopf and Fuchs, his assistant, are talking about one of the villains as a Vogel. In any case, the Vogel seems to be the one that is being trapped, that they're hunting, that they have their sights on, that eventually they get into their net. But it's used in all sorts of ways, and I try to have fun with that in the translation. Vogel, sometimes I try to actually use avian language often to describe the Vogel. This Tweety bird has chirped on us, or whatever it is. You'll see in the translation. But Vogel, I try to get the birdness of it in sometimes, not very often. Geht ihr noch? Verbeißt mit die Zähne, clenches his teeth, aber stuppt sie nicht weg. Willendig, sie sollen Tage führen bis auf dem richtigen Ort. So he contains his disgust, clenches his teeth, and goes on, following this Mädel. Ja, Halbwelt, ja, the Demi-Monde, the underworld. Honte. Yes, Miriam is wondering about the etymology of honte as a word for a sex worker. If anyone knows, feel free to jump in. I'm not sure where honte comes from. I did actually try to look it up before the program, but I couldn't find the etymology of honte. Purve, of course, another such word. Thomas points out that this issue of white slavery was everywhere in the newspapers at the time, a very present concern for the readers of these stories. Good. Also, by the way, it appears in other stories by Jonas Kreppel. It seems to have been a topic that interested him, but he has other stories in this genre of pulp fiction, not detective stories of Max Spitzkopf, but other thrilling sort of stories published also in 32-page pamphlets. One of them is about a girl. It all takes place in, I think it's Morocco, but a girl who's kidnapped from the Jewish quarter of Morocco and sold into the harem of the Sultan and made to serve in this capacity. And that story is called The Martyr, Der Koidish, because her uncle, her protector, ultimately martyrs himself to save her. That's another story by Jonas Kreppel. that I translated for someone who actually studies harems, and he had come upon this story and needed it translated, so I translated it for him. But also dealing with a similar theme. Yes, pigeon, as we see in the chat, often also used in this way. Yes, like a Feigl is in these stories. Good. Yes, feel free to pop in with questions, comments in the chat, and we can address them. Or if you want to say something, it's fine. Good. Ich bin an Italienerin, suddenly she says, sagt sie zu ihm. Und wir wollen uns herrlich amüsieren. I'm an Italian girl. We're going to have a lovely time with the wine and the fun. I'm an Italian girl, after all. But is she really? Spitzkopf detects something in her accent. An Italienerin direkt von Tarnopol, fragt lachendig. He recognizes she's from the Galician town of Tarnopol, not in fact an Italian girl. Oh, but perhaps she's an Italian girl direct from Tarnopol, which of course doesn't make sense. But he's saying, no, you're a Jewish girl, and I recognize you as a Landsfreu. Zerlacht sie sich auf den Kohl, zerlacht sie sich auf den Kohl. Azoi, du erkennst mich, Take. Bist doch Take a Mainländer. You've got my number, you recognize me. You are a Mainländer. So this is a word that gave me some trouble in translating, and I asked around about it, and it gave others the same trouble, Mainländer. Someone said, based on really nothing, oh, a mainlander, but it's not that. Main does not mean main in like it does in English anyway, and it wouldn't make much sense. But I think what I ultimately landed on was there's some sort of joke here with Mainland, that is, you're from my country, and my land, which is Milan. So you're from Mainland, you're from my country, but also perhaps a joke with my land, which is Milan, because she had said she's an Italian girl. So I think there's possibly something like that going on. Someone asks about some fun I've had in the translation. You'll notice I do this sometimes in the translation. It's not a word-to-word always translation. I try to bring out the fun of these stories, their pulpy quality, their silliness, their danger, figure out creative ways in English to get that across sometimes. Really, literary translation is very rarely about literal translation word to word. Really, that doesn't work. So I try to find ways to get the attraction of these stories across and get some of their excitement and humor across. Sometimes that requires being a bit creative, in my view. We have to remember that these stories were sold as individual pamphlets. People would buy a pamphlet, they'd read it. Maybe a few weeks later, they would kind of forget about the stories and situations and characters and style, and they'd read another one and enjoy it. Such that the style in these stories tends to be kind of, you see the same sorts of structures, the same sorts of dialogues, the same sorts of characters, really even the same wordings over and over and over and over. So by publishing them all in one volume, all together, I felt that we needed to find ways to sometimes diversify, add something to each translation, each character, each situation to make it stand out so that it's not so samey. So that was also part of my intention. So you'll see sometimes like that. Ja, weiter. Schweigt still und geht mit ihr, wohin sie führt ihm. Bald bleibt sie stehen vor einem eleganten Haus, wo sie klappt dreimal an in Teuer. A schwarze Negerin empfängt ihr, und sie gehen rein in einen eleganten, hellen Korridor. We should probably pause for that line for this character of the maid opening the door for them, who's called a schwarze Negerin. First of all, it must be said that this word Negerin, which sounds very, very, very uncomfortable for an English reading public, is not actually a loaded word in Yiddish. It's the neutral word for describing someone, a Black person of African descent. And why is this character Black? There were slaves of all types in the Ottoman Empire and in Constantinople. Muslim girls weren't allowed officially to be enslaved in the Ottoman Empire, but girls of other races, other ethnicities, other religions were. So you had white slaves, you had Black slaves, and this appears to be such a person. Good. Breite. Now we have a description of the interior of the brothel where this girl is leading him. Breite mit der Teppich belegte Treppe führen auf dem ersten Stock auf. Dort öffnet sich für sie ein Tier und bald befindet sich in einem herrlichen Salon. Ausgestattet mit Pluschmöbel, große Spiegeln und feine, weiche Divans. Etliche leicht gekleidete Mädchen drehen sich herum im Salon. Und sehen dich dem eleganten jungen Stutzer, überfallen sie ihm wie die Bienen. Okay. So he enters the salon and he's immediately surrounded by these leicht gekleidete girls, these lightly dressed girls, half naked. And they surround him like the bees, wie die Bienen. I then have some fun with this, with the idea that they are bees, like bees swarming around him, and he's swatting at them. So you'll see sometimes in the translation that follows, I have a bit of fun with that, extending that metaphor of the bees. Others are commenting on some of the history of the Ottoman Empire and trafficking there, slavery. But jede eine tänzelt ihm, finkelt mit die Augen und macht händlich, gedei ihm zuzuziehen. They're doing their mating dance in a way. But you'll see in my translation, while conveying that, I also am extending the bees to have a bit of fun with that. Die Jenneke aber, was hat ihm gebrengt, treibt sie weg, steigendig. Das ist mein Schatz. Ich hab mir ihm gebrengt. Mir gehört er. Das ist mein Schatz. This is my little treasure. Sei nur nicht so stolz, rufen die andere. Don't be so proud, don't be so haughty. Or I have look who's the queen, as in the queen bee. Anyway. Welche es wird dem Herr besser gefallen, mit der wird sich amusieren. Whichever of us he likes best, that's the one with whom he'll amuse himself. Spitzkopf setzt sich nieder bei a Tischl und schafft an Wein für der ganze Chever wegen. Die junge Halkes tanzten herum ihm, springen und singen ausgelassen. Manche nehmen ihm herum und willen ihm kuschen, andere setzen sich auf sein Scheuß und legen die Hände um sein Hals. He's well surrounded now. They're not only dancing around him, they're sitting on his lap, they're clasping their hands around his neck. Perhaps this might be nice for some gentlemen, but not for Spitzkopf. Ihm ekelt die ganze Sache. The whole thing disgusts him. Aber schweigt. Will doch sehen, ob es gefindet sich nicht zwischen sie die einige, was sucht. Although he's disgusted, he makes no protest. He needs to find out whether the people he's looking for are among this crowd, this swarm. A hübsche Zeit sitzt also zwischen der Gesellschaft. Dennoch steht auf und gesegnet sich. In the original, is he asking anything or just letting himself be danced on? I think he's letting himself be danced on. He's listening, of course, to their conversation, trying to put things together. His technique, his method is always never to, of course, never to reveal himself as who he is. So I think probably if he asked too many questions here, gave away too much, that he wouldn't want to do. So he sits there, he lets himself be flirted with and danced on. He engages them in conversation here and there. But he's always very careful not to reveal himself. Good. All right, Sally Hanasore comments on the tradition of some brothels in France to have women representing different ethnicities. One Jewish, possibly North African sex worker. That the men would have their choice of, etc. I think that was likely. I think whether or not the girls actually came from those backgrounds, they would have pretended to be one from Italy. Oh, this one's German. This one's African. This one's Muslim. So as to represent a sort of menu of options for the customer. Ihr geht schon weg, lieber Herr, rufen die Mädlach. Für was soll ich? Wollt ihr euch nicht mit uns amüsieren? Again, amüsieren. Which is, of course, euphemistic. But they're not going to go all the way and say exactly what it is. Not even as shocking as these stories are, there won't be an actual reference made very explicit to the sexual act. So that's why we have over and over, amüsieren sich. Yeah, and it's always just on the cusp of impropriety, as Thomas sort of points out here. Kreppel was writing for a traditional readership, perhaps some traditional, maybe some less so. But Spitzkopf has to remain this hero, remain dignified as best he can. So it's all in the name of rescue and of help. And always just on the cusp, both in the language and the situation and in his actions, of actual explicit impropriety. Of course, we do get explicit violence in the stories. That we do get, but we don't get explicit sex. Ich habe jetzt keine Zeit mehr, entfernte Ich will aber morgen wiederkommen. Right now, I don't have any time. I'll come back later. Come back tomorrow. Geht raus. Oh, finally. Fresh air. Freedom. Not surrounded by girls. Geht raus und atmet frei auf. Die gestickte Luft, der scharfe Geruch von die verschiedenen Puders und Parfumen hat ihm schier nicht erstickt. So we have this explicit description of what this environment was like for him. Finally, he goes outside. He can breathe fresh air. That suffocating air inside the salon of the brothel, that sharp stench of the various powders and perfumes really almost choked him when he was inside. In the Sherlock Holmes stories, we have one character who is interpreted in later stories, or by later readers of these stories and adapters of those stories, to be perhaps a romantic interest for Holmes, Irene Adler. She's not really in that story, in that original story. And indeed, Holmes doesn't have any romantic, any women in his life with any romantic purpose. And Watson, the Fuchs of those stories, says that Holmes really wasn't interested in the charms of women. And Spitzkopf is very much the same way. We never see him with a woman in any kind of social capacity, let alone romantic. This is as far as it goes. But of course, the whole time he's disgusted by it. His most intimate relationship is with Hermann Fuchs. Hermann Fuchs is the one person that he has a close and enduring, and I would say emotional relationship with. They're always together. One of them is always rescuing the other from some scrape. There are actually some very sweet scenes in the stories of, say, Fuchs has landed in a cellar, has been thrown down into a cellar and chained, and as he often ends up in a cellar. And Spitzkopf comes upon the cellar, rescues him, and dabs at his blood. And they have some words together before they move on to trying to escape from the cellar and go after the culprits. But the most quiet, intimate scenes are really between those two. Dieselbe Geschichte hat sich wiederholt in etliche so eine heißlich. Aber in kein einzigen hat Spitzkopf nicht gefunden das, was sucht. So he goes and does the same routine at a number of the brothels in town, as many as he can, but he's not able to find anything. You'll have to read the rest of the story to find how he does eventually land upon the right brothel, the right girl, the right culprits, etc. And whether he's able to rescue other girls in the process. But for that, you should check out The Adventures of Max Spitzkopf by Jonas Kreppel, translated by me, published by the Yiddish Book Center. And I think you'll amüsieren sich with these stories. I hope you will. Good.
I have a question. May I ask you a question?
Of course.
Was this material considered suitable for children? I mean, I think Beshutfesdike, was he 10 or 11 when he read these stories?
Yeah, you would have been a young boy reading these stories. Yeah. It is interesting. I mean, these stories really aren't kids' stories.
No.
They have quite adult content, not just this one. But kids read them. Kids get their hands on exciting, fun, interesting adventure stories, and these are. And yeah, someone says, like with Playboy magazines, a rite of passage, says Dina. I think that's right. I think reading stuff like this would have exposed them in a way that a Playboy magazine might, to things that their parents might not talk to them about, to things that they're not getting in cheder. So gives them a sort of education about the real world in a way.
Which is why he had to read them under the bed covers.
Perhaps so. Certainly would have had to hide them from melamdim in the cheder. There's a lot of stories of people sneaking around with their secular literature. Certainly. Thomas asks, is Fuchs in this story? Fuchs doesn't go to Constantinople. I'm trying to think if he's in the story at all. It might be one story without Fuchs. I can't remember exactly. He's certainly not in Constantinople. He doesn't play a role there. I wonder if at the start he's there or not. I'd have to look back and remember. Usually he plays quite an important role, but in this story, not. I'll let you in on a secret. This cover story, this cover illustration that we've chosen, because it's a really nice illustration, doesn't actually depict Spitzkopf. This is from Der Spion, the spy, that deals with that one very much inspired by Dreyfus affair, as is noted in the story. Dreyfus is mentioned, but it's a Jewish corporal in an Austrian military fort on the border with Italy who's accused of spying for the Italians. And this is an Italian guy, the bearded guy. And this is Fuchs. And they're grappling on the bridge, and eventually Spitzkopf comes to their rescue. But Spitzkopf is not here. Of course, he is here, so we do have him. But neither of these people is Spitzkopf.
Poor Fuchs winds up in cellars way too often. I was feeling sorry for him.
Yeah, always ends up being clobbered over the head, bound, and thrown into a cellar very, very often. Poor guy. But he is just like Watson. I remember in one of the Holmes stories, Holmes criticizes Watson and says to Watson, "You always take the most energetic approach." Basically, Fuchs gets an idea, he gets one clue, and he's off, and often gets into trouble. Spitzkopf is a little more measured, and a little more careful. Yeah. Okay, I see that there's some other questions. What led me to translate these stories? I was at the Yiddish Book Center working as a fellow in Amherst, Mass, and we got a shipment of books, as we do all the time at the Yiddish Book Center. And among this shipment were 5 of the Spitzkopf stories bound together into a volume. 5 of these original pamphlets. Very, very disintegrating, really crumbling with age, and because of the cheapness of the paper they were printed on. But I knew about these stories, I think, from Bashevis Singer, who really made the stories famous, because for generations, people weren't really able to find these stories, and they were very popular in their day, but most of the copies eventually were destroyed or thrown out, enjoyed and thrown out like comic books. It didn't last. So it's very hard to find the originals, but I did know about them from that quote from Bashevis Singer, who remembered them so fondly. And so I decided we would start translating them. I did a few. Eventually, the Yiddish Book Center asked if I would do all 15 and publish them as a volume. And then I had to go and find all the others. But I'll show you what the original one that I looked at the Yiddish Book Center looked like. This is the copy that is held at the Yiddish Book Center. So this is the first story, Geräubt zu der Schmad, Kidnapped for Conversion. It's a Jewish girl who's kidnapped, but in this case, to be forcibly converted to Christianity. And this is how it looked. So I was very interested in all of this, and very interested in this illustration that I couldn't make heads or tails of, because it had become so, whatever it was, the way it was printed or the age combined, it was impossible to make heads or tails of this image. So eventually I got the copy of the story from Yale, and I saw that this is the image, that it's a carriage holding the kidnapped girl, and Spitzkopf is apprehending the carriage on the streets of Vienna, outside of a convent. There's also an evil nun in the story and an evil priest. But just looking at this, to me, it presented a mystery. What is this illustration? What is inside this book? The back cover is all torn and tattered. So that was what I first got my hands on, what really intrigued me, and everything that might be within.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Do we know how he was paid in the story? He was obviously doing this for a living.
Oh, yes. So he doesn't take any money up front. At the end, he always, nearly always succeeds. Some of the stories, the victim is actually indeed dead by the end, but he does apprehend the criminals. So in that way, he succeeds. But he's paid by the family. The family always reaches out to him for help in finding the person that in their family that has been killed or that has been stolen from. And then eventually he's richly rewarded by the family. It always ends with that, with him being richly rewarded by the family and his fame reaching an even higher level in all of Vienna. That's pretty much how every story ends. Yeah. People are sharing some funny remarks. Yes, the bound volumes were for lending libraries. Indeed. So these pamphlets would be bound together for lending libraries. And you actually see in this one that the Yiddish Book Center has, which if you go to their exhibit, their main exhibit, which is about the diverse worlds of Yiddish culture, you'll find a section on Kreppel and Spitzkopf and this volume behind glass. But this has a stamp of the library at 176 Rivington Street in the Lower East Side of New York, where this volume was held. And I think on the other side, possibly names of people who have checked it out, scribbled out as each person returns it. I don't know. Anyway, this is what 176 Rivington Street looks like today. There's a new trendy wine bar there called Baby Sips. So I recommend you go to this Baby Sips and have a glass of wine and read a Spitzkopf story, and it'll just be just like old times. Okay. Why did you decide to change the name Spitzkopf to Spitzkopf in English? So this is, I guess, just a question about how I spelled it. It's spelled Spitzkopf. That's how I spell it, because that's how it would be spelled in German. And he's ultimately, Spitzkopf is a Viennese gentleman. He's a detective in Vienna. He's not living in a shtetl. I didn't think it would be appropriate to put it in this sort of YIVO standard transliteration of SHPITSKOP, or whatever it is. I wrote it in German orthography because that's, I feel like, how he would have spelled his name living in Vienna. But I still pronounce it Spitzkopf. Yeah. Yes. Yes, go to Jonas Schimmel's Knishes after and get a Knish. That's a good idea. How much did Kreppel earn from these pulp publications? That I really couldn't answer. I think these stories were very popular. And there's actually a lot of references to them being read. They were also pirated and printed with other titles in newspapers. But I don't know. I mean, he was publishing them through his, as Klaus Kreppel pointed out, through the printing house that he worked for, owned by his father-in-law. And I think these were designed and written in a way to get a lot of revenue for this publishing house, something that would have mass appeal. But I don't know exactly how much he earned. I'll show one of the examples of the pirated. Well, this is just an ad for the original pamphlets from a newspaper in Lviv. And interestingly, although it says on the pamphlets Max Spitzkopf der Wiener Sherlock Holmes, here it does say Max Spitzkopf der Jüdischer Sherlock Holmes. So there is a precedent for us calling him that on our cover. This is an ad to buy the pamphlets, but it was also eventually published under different names. This is Max Bleitstein, who's an author that doesn't seem to have actually existed. And printed as Die Zeudes von a Galicianer Detektiv, The Secrets of a Galician Detective. But it is one of the Max Spitzkopf stories. Yeah, it's this one is in Spitzkopf. In the pamphlet, it has Der gefälschte Testament. Here it's the gefälschte Savoy. It means the same thing, the forged will. And this is printed in a New York newspaper. Yes. Okay. Michael, are you raising a hand?
I am. So I'm wondering, I've read some of the translations, and in some you choose to keep the Yiddish word, and sometimes you explain what the Yiddish word means in English, and sometimes you just leave that. Did you have a rule as to like when you would decide to leave it as Yiddish instead of translating it somehow into English?
Here and there, I think I like to get the flavor of the original Yiddish and actually hear the Yiddish, sort of see the Yiddish. I can't remember exact instances here and there, but I feel like it's maybe when Spitzkopf is talking to a family from a shtetl that has reached out to him for help, and he would be speaking to them, you know, Mama Lushan. He'd be talking Mama Lushan to them. That is speaking in Yiddish, but also getting to the realness of the situation and speaking in an intimate way. And that, for that reason, actually speaking Yiddish. So there are times when certainly the characters are meant to be speaking German, and there are times when I think they're meant to be speaking Yiddish. So in times like that, I try to get in some of the Yiddish. And in times where I feel like it can be understood, if I drop in some Yiddish here and there to give a flavor of it and to give a feeling of where we are. I like to do that in all my translation. Well, I also have a translation, The Mother of Yiddish Theater, Memoirs of Esther Rochel Kaminska. And in her memoir, this Yiddish actress, she's often using Russian, Polish, German, Yiddish, all together. And I try sometimes to keep those original languages in play so we hear the sort of multilingualism of these stories and of this style, because that's very present. Yes. So I think that's mostly all. Are there what do you think, Julia? Shall we wrap up?
Yeah, we can certainly wrap up. I'm going to put an email in the chat so that way if anyone has any questions, they can reach out. And then we can always forward along your inquiry to Mikhl. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you so much, Mikhl. Thank you, Klaus, for joining. This was absolutely wonderful. And I'm going to put a link in the chat to purchase the translation. So that way we can all learn how the story ends, as well as a link to learn more about the International Association of Yiddish Clubs and Evo.
Yes, thank you all. I would just want to answer one other question that I just saw. Someone asks, as I'm a performer, have I thought about performing some of these stories? And I actually have made a sort of theatrical reading of one of the stories together with music. Abigail Reisman has written the music, a sort of klezmer score going along with one of the stories, Der Teutengräber, the Gravedigger. And this we've performed in Boston so far. I was just performing it in Melbourne, Australia at the Kadima Cultural Center there. But yes, if you'd like to have us do our musical theatrical adaptation of The Gravedigger, reach out. It's been fun, and hopefully we'll be doing it more in the future. Yeah. Thank you all for being here.